Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tiger podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorach. I'm here with Tigers beat writer, very tired young man, Evan Petzold. We had a full day yesterday of Detroit Tigers baseball, and then we had a full night of Detroit Tigers future baseball as they had the Major League Draft last night. We're going to talk about all those things. How you feeling today, Ev?
Yeah, long day yesterday. Thankful to my bosses for not having me cover the game during the day, which was obviously a dagger to the Tigers. And we got to talk about that, which is the way that it blew up right in their face. And they had a chance to, win a game and win a series against the Toronto Blue Jays and weren't able to get it done. But that didn't mean that I wasn't working yesterday because, as we all know, the draft was yesterday. And it was a big day for the Tigers. There was a lot going on, and they had 3 picks, and I was up until about 3 a.m. until I got a chance to finally finish my writing, because it's not only is it, you got to write about each pick, but then it's like at the end of the night, like I really wanted to recap something that jumped out to me about Max Clark, who was selected number 3 overall. So it was, go through all those picks, talk to Max Clark. We got a chance to talk to President of Baseball Operations Scott Harris, Assistant General Manager Rob Metzler, and Scouting Director Mark Connor. That was the first time that we've talked to Metzler and Connor, so that was really interesting and fascinating to get their perspectives on these players. I'm looking forward to doing the same Monday and Tuesday as the draft wraps up. But yeah, let's just start with the game, because I think that's where we need to go, just because of the fact that it was the last game of the season. Then dive immediately into draft stuff. But Tigers had a 3-4 week. They won 2 of 3 against Oakland. They won 2 of 3 against the Blue Jays, and they also had that win against Colorado there on Sunday. So it was, it wasn't great. I was kind of disappointed with the fact that, they lost back-to-back games against Oakland, and then they were only able to win, one of those games against the Blue Jays. I guess it's probably more fair to call it a, 2-4 week for them, just because I don't think we count that game against Colorado, considering the fact that we record on Sundays normally. So, yeah, it was a dagger for the Tigers. They were up. They had a chance to win, and they blew it in the bottom of the 9th inning, or top of the 9th inning, with 1 out left. And Danny Jansen hits a home run. It's a 2-run shot. Game's tied. Hits it off Alex Lang. Goes to extra innings, and the Tigers weren't able to scratch anything across in the 10th inning, whereas the Blue Jays were. And that's how the Tigers' unofficial first half of the season ends as they head into the All-Star break.
I don't think any game explains the caliber of the first half of the Detroit Tigers better than yesterday. And my buddy Kirk Crawford, sports editor of the Free Press, executive producer of Days of Roar, likes when I try to use my profanity judiciously. So I will not waste any profanity on yesterday's game. It just doesn't deserve my profanity. It's getting a little worrisome that you're starting to flip coins when Alex Lang comes in the game. And wouldn't shock me if A.J. Hinch starts throwing Alex Lang in the 8th and Jason Foley to close games for at least a little while, because it's starting to become a problem. And Alex Lang's too good to be causing these types of problems. So he's going to need to work his business out before he costs us victories. That's all I have to say about that.
It was a really weird week for the Tigers, though, wasn't it, Mark? Just the way that, they couldn't hit the ball in their first game against Oakland. They got smoked in the second game against Oakland. And then they come out and they win 9-0 in Thursday's game. And that was, it was like, okay, where's that been for, the last 2 games? And then you go to the Toronto series. Toronto comes to town, and it's a 12-2 loss in the first game. And then it's a freaking no-hitter in the second game. And then a tough gut-punching loss in the third game. It just felt like a lot of up and down baseball. That's kind of what we've had all season, is it not?
Well, let me share with you my thought on that, which is bad teams, not consistent, can't bring it every day. And I think this week was a perfect example of that. You just never know what you're going to get from the Detroit Tigers from day to day, because you have so many players that belong in AAA that you never know how they're going to play from day to day. So, your really good players like Riley Green, most of the time they're going to play well. But so much of the roster doesn't belong in the major leagues at this point in time, especially guys who are position players that you get what you get. So this is going to continue till they get better players. And I think this week was a microcosm of what they are. So
well, let me ask you a question, Mark, because and then we can jump into the draft. It's Tigers at the All-Star break. They're 5.5 games back. They're 39-50. That's third place in the American League Central. So 5.5 games back of the Cleveland Guardians up top. The Minnesota Twins are a half game behind the Guardians. So that tells you where the Tigers are at. 5.5 games. Can they still make a push for this, you think? Even with the trade deadline coming up August 1st?
Absolutely. But you just have to put it in perspective of likelihood, okay? So my answer is, if they were a better team, I'd give them a 50% chance. With this particular lineup and the stubbornness of not failing with more interesting players who have more upside, yet maybe more inconsistency, I put the chance at competing at maybe 10 or 15% because I like their starting pitching. But even their starting
pitching... And you like Riley Green.
Who doesn't like Riley Green?
Welcome back, Riley Green.
Yeah. And, by the way Riley swung for these 2 days was a thing of beauty, although you did see a left-hander kind of jinxed his mojo there in his third at-bat yesterday. But holy smokes, were the first 6 at-bats just a thing of freaking beauty. So, but they have too many players that just, you're always waiting for them to do better, and it just gets tiring. And, hopefully they'll at least find out if some of their kids at Toledo can get promoted, and if they can improve upon what they're doing, or at least the adversity they go through in the major leagues is taking them somewhere, because right now they're just taking them in a circle of nowhere. So, enough for the Detroit Tigers of last week. Just an annoying, aggravating week that doesn't really deserve much rehashing. How about last night, man? What'd you think? I mean, the draft was awesome. I don't think any pundit got it correct. And it was good to see Pittsburgh actually pick a player that deserved to go 1-1 at 1-1. Good for them.
It was definitely confusing going into it. Nobody really knew what to expect. That was, I didn't know what to expect. I don't think the top draft experts knew what to expect either. And there's a lot of, rumors floating around about the Pirates taking Max Clark, taking Walker Jenkins, taking, maybe even Wyatt Langford was another name that was kind of in that mix, and doing a, underslot deal, saving some money for later in the draft. And they just come right out and they pick Paul Skeens. And everyone was like, oh, wow, okay, let's shake things up. And for me, I said, okay, this is kind of interesting, because now the Tigers will have their pick of either Dylan Cruz or Wyatt Langford. They're going to get one of those two guys, depending on what the Nationals do. And that's been the talk of this whole draft leading up to, Sunday night, was the Tigers need to take LSU outfielder Dylan Cruz or Florida outfielder Wyatt Langford. And the experts had said that. I had heard that from people that I had talked to, saying, hey, look, they're probably going to go with one of those two guys. I think that was just kind of the general consensus, was that if one of those two guys are there, the Tigers are going to take them. And the Nationals selected LSU outfielder Dylan Cruz, who I think the Tigers probably had higher on their board than Wyatt Langford. That's just an assumption. I think Dylan Cruz is a better baseball player. I think Wyatt Langford maybe has more upside, but I think, Dylan Cruz is the guy that can help you ASAP. And it would have been a smart pick for the Tigers to get him. But you know what? He wasn't there. And so the Tigers were forced with a decision to make. And the question was, are you going to take Wyatt Langford, or are you going to take the high school bat? And the Tigers ended up going with Max Clark. He went to Franklin Community High School in Franklin, Indiana. Outfielder who's more of a true center fielder, whereas Wyatt Langford is more of a left fielder. Obviously, the big difference between them being Max Clark is a college prep hitter, and Wyatt Langford has played in the SEC, and he's tore it up there, and he's hit 21 home runs last season. There's a lot to like about Wyatt Langford, but the more you dig into Max Clark, there's also a lot to like about him. And then the Tigers have another pick. It's 37 overall, and they got Kevin McGonigal, a high school shortstop. He's from Monsignor Bonner High School in Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania. Kevin McGonigal is one of the best pure hitters in the draft class, according to Tiger scouting director Mark Connor, as well as a different scout that I had talked to, just to kind of gauge, hey, like, how real is that comment? No, that comment's real. This guy's a pure hitter, and he can really play. And then the Tigers went with Max Anderson, a second baseman from Nebraska. That was their first college player that they selected with the number 45 pick in the draft. So the haul ends up being Max Clark at number 3, Kevin McGonigal at number 37, and Max Anderson at number 45. 2 high school bats, 1 college bat.
All right, so let's run through it. I love Langford. I love Cruz. I like Max Clark a lot. Never thought that would be the Tigers pick. But after I've had an evening to do some homework and kind of process the entire thing, I want to reassure everybody that the Tigers did not get shortchanged in their 3rd pick drafting Max Clark. This was a beauty is in the eye of the beholder type of pick. And Max Clark, in many drafts over the last decade, would have been a consensus 1-1 pick. The Torkelson draft, no questions asked. The Mize draft, absolutely 1-1. The Tigers did not get shortchanged taking Max Clark. And
this draft is just so deep. I mean, it's so deep and it's so heavy at the top. I mean, those top 5 players are
generational.
Yeah.
And I think there's more players than that. I mean, it's a great draft, and hopefully the Tigers will leverage that to get themselves some players, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I think we'll use a Corbin Carroll comparison for Max Clark. And if you've enjoyed Corbin Carroll before he dislocated his shoulder the other day, and he's just been an absolute terror all season long. And there's a lot of similarities between Max Clark and Corbin Carroll. So, a pretty advanced player, a very polished player, maybe not a 30 home run guy, but a really good eye, an outstanding runner, a true center fielder, and a dirt dog. Guy loves to play, got a ton of personality, Midwest kid. There's a lot to love about Max Clark. So he had a great workout. Tell us about what Connor and Metzler had to say about Max Clark last night.
Yeah, well, first, let's just run through the stats. I think that's important, even though they are high school stats. I think people just want to hear about, what guys do. So Clark hit .646 with 9 doubles, 5 triples, 6 homers, 52 walks, and 5 strikeouts in 28 games as a senior. He also spent some time back in September 2022 with Team USA in the WBSC Under-18 World Cup. He hit .280 with 1 home run, 3 walks, and 3 strikeouts in 8 games. He had a 3-hit game in the championship game and helped Team USA win the gold medal. So that's a little bit of background on him. Also was named 2023 Gatorade National Baseball Player of the Year. He was also named Indiana Gatorade Baseball Player of the Year as a sophomore and a junior. He's got experience as a pitcher, but that's not going to happen. He also played wide receiver for their football team, and he played basketball his freshman and sophomore year. So there's multi-sport, in the bloodlines, in the background, and obviously baseball being the sport that he's best at. But no, a lot of praise for him. I mean, look, Max Clark came to Comerica Park on June 13th for a private workout and talked about how it was very personal, very man-to-man. Got to talk to Scott Harris, got to talk to, Tigers personnel just to get a feel for them, and, they could get a feel for him. And they also went out and they saw him a few times, during the winter when he was making some swing changes. He was changing where he, holds his hand on the bat as far as, and as well as the base of his stance. So he made those 2 tweaks. And as he was doing that, the Tigers came out to visit him at his, local facility in Indiana. That kind of jump-started, really the marriage between Max Clark and the Detroit Tigers. And obviously it intensifies as things go on. And he has the great visit to Detroit. He loves it. He has an awesome experience, takes BP, works on that gap-to-gap power that he feels like he has. Also hits a couple balls out of the ballpark. That's something that he's looking to develop over time. And yeah, it's just positive vibes kind of across the board. Scott Harris talked about him as an elite talent. The quote was great. I'm going to read it to you. Quote, "He was the best player on our board at that pick, and we are thrilled that he got to our pick. We think Max is a 5-tool player. I think that label gets thrown around way too much in our industry. We think Max has all 5. end quote. So the Tigers view this guy as a true 5-tool player, an elite player, someone who can be a difference maker. And I don't see why not. I don't see why that's not possible.
Like I said, just an advanced baseball player in
and
every
look at
way.
Who else was drafted out of high school, Mark. Colt Keith, Riley Green. There's some talent.
And drafted her. And, look, last night, I'm not going to belabor this particular point. Many people have made it. But if you think, Max Clark is going to take forever to get to the major leagues, well, we're going to see how long it takes. But the last two high school players that could really hit that the Detroit Tigers drafted were Riley Green, about 160 minor league games, and Colt Keith. It'll be about 200 games before he's promoted, and should have been promoted at 160 games.
Well, Riley didn't have the 2020 season either, just because of COVID.
Right. So, and I think I will share that what's very interesting is it seems like Clark's already agreed to a contract. He took the Texas slot, which is $7.7 million, which we'll get into later, save the Tigers $650,000. But if he's agreed to a contract, he's signing within a week, and he's going to be playing in the complex league within 2 weeks. And he seemed like the type of kid that can't wait to go. So if they can get him 60, 70 games of complex, and maybe, for a month in Lakeland playing low A, and getting his, maybe beat up a little bit because he is 18 years old. Those are beautiful things. So, the fact that we don't have to wait for him to get a start and have to have a protracted contract negotiation, I think's a lot of extra upside to what they did yesterday.
Definitely. No, I agree. I think it was a good pick, all things considered. Like, you look back and you say, man, what about Wyatt Langford? And sure, there might be some comparisons to Wyatt Langford for a long time, because that's the guy the Tigers passed on. It's the same thing with, Jackson Jobe and Marcelo Meyer. It's the same thing with Jace Young and the infielder from the Angels,
Zach Neto.
Yeah. So it's going to be the same regardless, but at the same time, like, the Tigers got a good player. And I think one of the things that stood out to me was the fact that he was making those swing adjustments back in the winter. I think that tells me that he's a player that's going to make changes at every level of the minor leagues. Scott Harris kind of talked about that. And, Mark Connor talked about the details of some of those changes that they witnessed firsthand going to see him. And I think that's going to help him make adjustments at each level he moves up in the farm system. And, he's not going to be stubborn with it. He's going to make changes. He's going to make adjustments. And the big thing was just hitting too many ground balls. He was able to get the ball in the air a little bit more this season, and he's going to grow into that. I like the pick. I really do.
Yeah. I think some of these things are, not worth a lot of analysis. He's just coming out of high school.
No, but the fact that he's able to make the changes, that says a lot.
The willingness to make changes is everything, because every hitter is going to tweak as time goes on. And, and I'm, as I said, I think it was an outstanding pick. Do I love Wyatt Langford? Who the heck doesn't love Wyatt Langford? Okay.
Right.
But let's move on. We got what we got. It was like having a chance to date two beautiful models, and you picked one. So, let's talk about draft pick number 2, Kevin McGonigal, much less well known. But when you do some homework on him, a lot of the same traits. And to be blunt about it, probably a second baseman, although he may start it short. But to sum up Kevin McGonigal, this boy rakes. He rakes. He hits the baseball. There's a lot of argument that he may have been the best high school hitter in the draft. And, Max Clark was a high school hitter. So middle infielder, rakes, right-hand hitter, another dirt dog. I don't think anybody doesn't like Kevin McGonigal, especially when he's got a bat in his hands. Tell us what Mark Connor had to say about him.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a guy who's going to hit. And you mentioned it. And I know you were doing your research on Kevin McGonigal while I was writing my overnight story, and I was up till 3 a.m. writing about Max Clark. But yeah, I mean, this guy is somebody that the Tigers really like, and they think that he's going to be able to, he's going to handle the bat, and he's going to handle the bat immediately. And that stands out to me. So it's another high school player, another left-handed hitter that they got in the organization. Both Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal hit lefty. Pure bat-to-ball skills, just kind of pure hit tool, everything that you want to see in a hitter. Good athleticism, playing shortstop right now. Quiet, soft feet, pretty good hands, good baseball tempo and timing. So it's like that internal clock is where it needs to be. Now the question, just because of his range, is, does he stick at shortstop or does he have to move to second base? I don't think it really matters right now. And also, it won't matter if he hits. Nobody's going to care if he's playing shortstop or second base if he's hitting. And that's my opinion on it. So, yeah, look, I mean, I had another, National League scout that, shot me a text after the Tigers drafted McGonigal and said, might be the best pure hit tool in the entire class. So that backs up everything that, Mark Connor had to say about him. And for the stats, he hit 350 with 8 doubles, 4 triples, 6 home runs, 32 walks, and 2 strikeouts in 25 games as a senior in high school. He was named the Pennsylvania Gatorade Player of the Year. He also played for Team USA in the Under-18 World Cup, so he's on the same team as Max Clark. Again, that was last September. He hit 240 with 1 home run, 5 walks, and 3 strikeouts in 9 games. Again, Team USA won the gold medal. So yeah, look, I think he probably stays at shortstop to start, and then eventually we'll have to move off of that and move to second base. But they like his footwork, they like his hands, they like his arm. They think that, the arm strength is there. The question is just, what's the range going to look like? And, that'll determine whether he's a shortstop or a second baseman. But again, he hits. That matters.
Yeah, baseball player, plus arm, surprising power, pretty mature body. A really, really, really good pick for the second round. May have to pay him a little bit over slot, but he's a baller. And, it's hard not to like the first 2 picks. I understand they're both high school guys, but I'm a big believer in the draft of taking best player available. Don't care if they're high schoolers, college guys from Europe. They landed in a spaceship. Don't really care. Just want guys that can play. And usually guys that can really play get there sooner than later. So, when people start complaining that Detroit's drafting high school players, as I said before about Max Clark, guys that can play, they get there. Doesn't take them a long time. And I'll tell you what, we're going to discuss the 3rd pick in the draft. But first, we're going to take a break. All right, Eb, let's talk about the 3rd pick. Not somebody who I was super impressed with. We took a second baseman who was one of the best hitters in the Big Ten, not too athletic, probably going to be a first baseman. Talk to us about him.
Yeah, well, first, I got to ask you, because you mentioned Scott Harris in the first 2 picks, and you seem to really like these 2 picks. And I do want to, hat tip to Scott Harris just for some of the savviness going about it. You had mentioned, Max Clark going under slot. And yeah, that's actually how kind of all this works, right? Is there's ways that you can maneuver yourself around the draft board and, get yourself a Kevin McGonigal, with your 3rd pick, as opposed to having to go with somebody else. And so Clark signed an underslot deal with the Tigers for about $7.7 million. That's what he's signing for, which is the value of the number 4 overall pick. The number 3 pick came with a bonus slot value of about $8.3 million. So that savings, Tigers are able to turn that, and they're able to toss some of that to Kevin McGonigal. And then the Tigers go with their 3rd pick. And when they made their 3rd pick, I got a text immediately that said, that's a money saver. That's a money saver. And it's second baseman Max Anderson from Nebraska. He's been in college for 3 years, named Big Ten Freshman of the Year, has a ton of power, probably is going to play first base. He's a guy that you could have gotten later in the draft if you wanted to, but probably wants to go under slot, which then allows the Tigers to, do a little dance with their 3rd round pick and with their 4th round pick. That's where you can then maybe push a high schooler down and pay him more money. And you can get another impact player that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to get had you have not gone, under slot on Max Anderson. So it's almost like the deal and it's crazy how it works, because it's almost like the deal for Max Clark sets up Kevin McGonigal, and then the deal for Max Anderson sets up what they're going to do in the 3rd round, in the 4th round, after their first 3 picks on Sunday, which was, 1st round competitive balance and 2nd round. I like the savviness of it. I really do. I don't know how you feel about it, but I think that it's key.
Well, here's my answer to that. Proof's in the pudding. Connor and Metzler, new guys, new jobs, have been good at these things previously. Come from two pretty pedigreed teams who have shrewdly drafted throughout, day 2 of the Major League Draft, and we're going to find out what they got. They got a little bonus money. They got almost $1 million to either spread over 3-4 or just burn on a great high upside, don't go to college, high school player in the 4th round.
You like that, don't you? You like that.
I'll like it when I see who they draft. So I'm a show me kind of guy. So, but I like that they're trying to employ some strategy. I'm not real sure I like their pick in the 3rd round because I just don't see much utility to it. But let's see what happens. And I am trying to be open-minded. It's a new staff. It's a new strategy. It's a new thought process. And, I want these guys to show me more than making quick snap judgments on what's up. I mean, it's like yesterday, I wasn't mad about Max Clark, but, I was disappointed they didn't take Langford, but given it some deeper thought, I think the players are much closer together than I initially may have considered. And, when you're crafting a team, you have the responsibility of crafting a team in the image of what you see. And that's why they took Max Clark over Wyatt Langford. There are reasons they felt that, they wanted to build more around Clark than Langford, and we're going to find out if they're right or not. So,
well, Max Anderson, just so people know, hit .414 with 20 doubles, 21 home runs, 20 walks, and 29 strikeouts in 57 games. For Nebraska, again, like I said, 3-year college player, right-handed hitter, could become full-time first baseman, below average defense. But the data does stand out to folks. It's easy, above average power to all fields, high in-zone contact rates. Swings a lot, and sometimes he's going to chase, but at the same time, when he's able to swing inside the zone, or pitches inside the zone, he's going to make contact and create some damage. So that's really where his value is how much power is he going to be able to give you? Does he move to a corner at some point? Is he just a first baseman and he's first base depth in your organization? Maybe. You don't love that with the number 45 pick, but at the same time, if the dude is going to somehow figure out how to hit, 30 jacks in the big leagues, he's a big leaguer. So that's really where it's going to come down to for Max Anderson.
Yep. And even two people that study the draft as much as you and I do, you start getting down to the Max Andersons, maybe a guy that most people had ranked between 90 and 100. We just haven't seen him enough to really have much of a detailed scouting report on him. We have, you and I have unbelievably good sources and people we trust done over years, but the answer is we don't know, and we have to see who else they draft.
Yeah, right. Mark, how many times have I seen Max Anderson play live?
0.
Right.
All right. So first 3 picks, really like the first 2. Third one, we're going to take under advisement. We'll see what happens the rest of the day. And the rest of the day is pretty important. I'm sure they're going to add some pitching because the Detroit Tigers are pretty thin in the organizational depth pitching part of the equation right now. So we'll see what happens the rest of the day. We'll talk about it next week. I wanted to move on to the big 2 because we are at the All-Star break. So I wanted to ask a few important questions right now. First question to the big 2. How many long-term pieces do the Detroit Tigers have right now?
You talking in the big leagues or just across the board?
I'm talking anywhere in there. Anywhere in there. I don't care if they play at Comerica or in the Complex League. How many long-term pieces they got?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I mean, a handful, I would say. I think enough. I mean, I understand that you look at it and there's questions up and down, but you got to think that Riley Green is a long-term piece. You have to think that Spencer Torkelson, Kerry Carpenter, maybe. I think there's still some things that need to be proved with him. But I think you got Riley Green, Spencer Torkelson, Kerry Carpenter. Matt Vierling is probably a long-term piece, even if it's just as a fourth outfielder when it's all said and done. Jake Rogers, that gives you 5.
Pitching.
Yeah, Tarek Skubal, I think that's the only one you can really count on right now. In the big league rotation, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Alex Lang, Jason Foley, and that's 8 players total. We'll leave it at that because they're the only proven guys that are in that mix. Reese Olson, obviously, I think you can maybe start to talk about putting him in that mix, but I haven't seen enough yet. I want to see how he does, the rest of the season and once he slides back into the rotation. But he's an interesting player for sure. Someone you got to keep your eye on. Casey Mize, I think you got to throw in that mix, even though he hasn't been healthy. I think
Colt Keith.
You view him in the mix. Yeah, of course. Colt Keith.
Jackson Joe.
Yeah, Jackson Joe. Parker Meadows, Justin Henry Malloy. I don't know if all these guys are everyday big leaguers, but are they guys that are going to make an impact in the big leagues long term? Definitely.
All right. So I've wanted to talk about this for quite a while, and I don't know if we'll get too deep into it, but in order to make the playoffs, you need to get 40 WAR. People hear WAR all the time, and players get a WAR score based upon the cumulative performance they put on the field, and anywhere from, not just hitting, but, the overall way they hit, how much they walk, all kinds of different, their defense they play, how they run the bases. Pitchers also, get a WAR score based upon how they perform in leverage, how many people they strike out and walk, their ERA adjusted. So, bottom line is I asked you a question of how many long-term pieces they have, and I want to define it a little better for you to be fair, is how many players you have that are a 2.5 WAR player or more. Don't really count relievers. Relievers are kind of fungible unless they are guys that are going to be here for a long time and are going to be able to shut people down over a period of years. So,
you want me to re-answer the question? I'm going to re-answer the question. Riley Green, Tarek Skubal, Colt Keith.
Okay, now we're talking. And on the fringe of that, we're going to also include Jake Rogers, who's got a really good chance if he continues at a similar pace he's playing at this year to be about a 3 WAR player, which is very, very useful. Jason Foley may be one of the most tangible long-term relievers they have because Jason Foley can repeat what he does often, game after game, and the reliability factor is pretty high. But it's very difficult to really look at relievers in a long-term sense. And, as dominating as Alex Lang can be, it's still very inconsistent. There's still too many full months. I mean, Alex Lang has given up, I think, 14 runs in the last 5 weeks. So it's hard to depend on a guy like that as a long-term piece. So, the answer is you'd like to think Max Clark is a long-term piece. He's also a high school baseball player that got drafted yesterday.
Right, he's 18.
So the answer is not a lot. Matt Vierling is not a long-term piece. Matt Vierling is,
fourth outfielder?
Yeah, there you go. Fourth outfielders are not long-term pieces. We can find a fourth outfielder in 15 minutes. There's, 40 of them that we can make acquisition of without giving up too much. So, my answer is the Detroit Tigers do not have a lot of long-term pieces. And, disappointingly, as much as I love Tarek Skubal, I'm in a weird minority about Tarek Skubal. Tarek Skubal's thrown 300 innings since his Tommy John surgery, including college. And he's now had Tommy John surgery and a flexor tendon issue. And is unbelievably sexy and dominating as he's looked since he's come back. And hat tip to Robin Lund and, Chris Fetter and Juan Nieves, because holy smokes did they polish him up. Oh,
they tweaked his mechanics to get more out of the fastball. I mean, that fastball is zipping, and it has been even going back to the rehab assignments that he was on. He was sitting like 96 consistently in his rehab starts. He was not sitting 96 in the past with the Tigers. And so
how about command?
Yeah, I mean, it's pinpoint.
How about slider shape?
nasty with depth.
Ooh, baby. Okay.
But they optimized all that. And so, again, you're right. Hat tip to Robin Lund, hat tip to Chris Fetter, hat tip to Juan Nieves, 3 pitching guys. Chef's kiss for their work.
And here's what I'll tell you about pitchers. I know a little bit about pitchers from my own experience in my own house, okay? Without getting too deep into it. Heredity has a lot to do with it. So some guys, durable as can be. Some guys, genetics just wasn't good to them. So as great as they are, they keep breaking, and pitchers break. It's not a matter of if a pitcher's going to break, it's when. Very few are durable. So do I worry about Tarek Skubal? Oh, hell yeah. Can I depend on him? Absolutely not. Because I just can't trust the health. Justin Verlander, I trusted the health. But Justin Verlander is a unicorn. Okay? Max Scherzer, unicorn. Remember how good Anibal Sanchez was?
Mm-hmm.
Broke every 15 minutes. Okay? Pitchers, you got to understand they are what they are.
Now, what happens if Tarek Skubal stays healthy the rest of the season? He's healthy all of next season. Does your opinion on that shift in a way? Because he has had the Tommy John, he has had the flexor tendon, and it's like, okay, he should be good now? Or do you worry about this for the rest of his career?
I worry about it. I'm worried that he's going to break at any time. He already showed me he's going to break at any time. Were you ready for him to break last year?
No, nobody was.
Okay, right. The velocity started degrading. He broke. He was out. Okay. So my answer is there are going to be teams that are going to have a different opinion than I do. All right. And there's going to be some really, really good players that you might be able to obtain if you were willing to include Tarek Skubal in a deal. And, I've said this to you. I've said this to some of our other friends that are within this industry. And, I don't think it's that unusual of an idea. All I'm saying to you is I 100% acknowledge Tarek Skubal's greatness. I also understand I'm the kind of guy, I may be wrong, I'm a sell high guy on that. I'm at least listening to what people are offering me. Okay. If I can get a great shortstop that's in the top 30 and I can scout him and believe he's really going to be good, I'm at least listening to what people have to say about it. You might think I'm crazy, but, I can find pitching. I may not be able to find Tarek Skubal caliber pitching, but at the same time, if Tarek Skubal comes down with another elbow injury, that's pretty much it, boys. He's all done. That's flexor tendon, 2 TJs, let's say. If he had to have TJ again, come on. There's not a lot of guys that have had that many elbow issues that have come back to be durable and be good for a long time.
No, it sounds like Walker Buehler.
Mm-hmm. So, I'm not, I may be, people might, think what I'm saying is heresy, but I'm just bringing up points worth discussing. Okay. And Tarek Skubal looks so good these 2 outings, but they're letting him only throw 60 pitches for a reason, because they understand what they're up against. Okay. And, big league teams have a lot of ways to, understand the health circumstances of their players, the stress, the long-term effects. And there's not really anything out, as much as we like to think they're only 5.5 out, I think the Detroit Tigers and their front office have a bigger picture in mind when it comes to some of these things. And that's why Tarek Skubal throws 4 innings. Okay.
Certainly. Which is a bummer though, because again, from a fan's perspective, right, it's, man, we've been waiting for so long just to compete, just to do something, just to be in the mix. I think that's why, a lot of the fans, they want to see Colt Keith and Parker Meadows and Justin Henry Malloy. They don't want you to deal Erod. They understand why you have to, but they don't want to, because they want to go for something for the first time in forever.
That's right.
But there is a bigger picture at play, of course.
Yep. So all I'm saying to you is, keep all these things in mind, be adult about it. Sometimes you don't like hearing it. It was like when I didn't hear Wyatt Langford yesterday. And, I heard Max Clark and I thought about it and I realized, it was a pretty damn great pick. All right. Second question, the big two. What do you want to see in the second half? Let's get on to it.
I want to see the Tigers get a haul for Eduardo Rodriguez. I don't know if they're going to, but that's what I want to see because that's what I think the second half really comes down to. I want to see Eduardo Rodriguez pitch his butt off, pitch very well, which he didn't do in his first start back from the injury. It was disappointing. He needs to pitch very well, and the Tigers need to use what they can and use their leverage and try to trade him. If he doesn't pitch well, they're going to be screwed. And so I need to see Eduardo Rodriguez pitch well if I'm the Tigers. Otherwise, it could be a sticky situation where you're not really going to like that return. So he's got to pitch great if the Tigers want to get as much as possible for him. I want to see them get a haul. Eduardo Rodriguez is going to have to kind of open the runway for them to do that. He's going to have to open the gate to get there. And that comes with his performance. He was not sharp in his first game back. Again, it's just the first game back, but 5 runs on 6 hits in 4 innings, no walks, 7 strikeouts. Like, that was encouraging. But that command, that pinpoint command that he had, really all throughout the beginning of the season just was not there.
But the stuff was there.
The stuff was there for sure. And I think he needs to command his pitches. And if he doesn't, that's exactly what can happen. That's the difference between Eduardo Rodriguez with command and Eduardo Rodriguez without command. In his first 11 starts, Mark, he had a 2.13 ERA and he had 16 walks and 67 strikeouts. It was everything that you wanted him to be in a pitcher. He was great. He was outstanding. And you even want to run it back to, I told you about his 11 starts. Even if you go look back at his last 9 starts before, ruptured the pulley in his index finger, 1.4 ERA in those 9 starts. That's what good Eduardo Rodriguez can be for you. The game against the Oakland Athletics where the Tigers lost 12-3, that's an example of what he can do when he's not on his game with the command. So I think he's got to lock it back in. He's got a big month coming up, and there's a lot riding on it for the Tigers.
I have no doubt he'll lock it back in. He looked really good. He just made a few mistakes, and as I've joked many times lately, big league hitters don't miss mistakes, dude. They just don't. So
I have a question, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way in which you think Eduardo Rodriguez does not opt out of his contract? Like, could this go as bad? Like, what if he just loses it the rest of the season and doesn't have it? Is there any chance that he says, actually, no, I'm going to opt back in?
For the sake of brevity?
No way.
No chance.
Right.
I mean, he'd have to be absolutely either terrible, which is not going to happen, or get injured again. That'd be the only two. I mean,
I just wonder what's going to happen with what the Tigers are going to be able to get back for him. Like, that's the big question. And I got to start doing some digging around with other people asking, hey, like, what do you think he can realistically, net the Tigers at the trade deadline? Because he does still have years left on his contract. And that is a situation where I don't think that the opt-out helps the Tigers. I think that hurts the Tigers. I think that if he was on an expiring deal, that would benefit the Tigers more than the situation they're in right now. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I think if a different team trades for him and, the performance just goes to the shitter or there's an injury, there's a chance he opts back into the contract. That's a risk for other teams. I wonder what the Tigers can get.
I'm going to give you a couple trade ideas, but we're going to take a break first. I noticed, as an example, the Dodgers demoted Miguel Vargas to AAA. Really good minor league hitter, good young player. Played him at second, had played third before. The Dodgers produce these guys one after the next, after the next, after the next. They have Michael Busch. They have, quite a few interesting minor league players. The Dodgers probably need a starter. Rodriguez would be pretty interesting to them. They also have Julio Urias, going to be a free agent after this year. I kind of tend to doubt the Dodgers won't re-sign him, but still, it might be, that might be a destination that might have some interest in, Eduardo Rodriguez. He can also pitch in a playoff game. So if you package Eduardo Rodriguez and a reliever to the Dodgers, there's some good players to get back. Okay. A player on the outs, kind of having a slightly better year than Nick Maton, but maybe a better hitter. That might be something the Tigers can monitor or give you an approximation of the type of player that you can get back for Eduardo Rodriguez. So, other teams are pretty interesting. I think Atlanta, who does not have a lot of things left in their system these days after almost everybody else has made it to the big leagues in the past 2 years. Another team to keep an eye on. We'll see. Tampa always in the mix for stuff like this. Houston might need a player, might need a pitcher.
I love the Orioles. I still love the Orioles there. I do.
I think the Orioles might ask about different pitching than Eduardo Rodriguez, although, Jordan Westerberg would be somebody that I think everybody will pursue from the Orioles, and we haven't even figured out if the Orioles are willing to give him up yet. But they have crazy minor league depth there. They have just so many different guys. Hurstead, Mayo, they got a lot of depth, and I'm sure they'll be able to make a great deal. That's a team that I would talk to Scooble about, which I know breaks people's heart. But
you can get a lot back from them for Tarek Scooble.
Yeah. We also have Michael Lorenzen, who's been streaky, but still pretty good. Also somebody that could be used as a reliever. I don't think he's going to bring a ton back in a deal. Got Jose Cisnero, who was just unhittable in the month of June, and in the month of July has been pretty hittable.
Those are the big three for me. It's Rodriguez, Lorenzen, and Cisnero as trade candidates to really watch.
Right. So we'll see. Depends on what people offer. I was against the idea of trading Alex Lang. I don't think they're really going to deal him. I think they're married to him and think they can fix him. But, I'm always open to any trade offer anybody wants to make me. I can always say no. Okay. So I'm pretty open-minded about that stuff. And it should be a pretty interesting trade deadline because, to be really honest with you, Scott Harris hasn't really had to make too many difficult decisions. And we're going to find out a little bit more of what he's made out of and, what his surrounding support staff is also made of, because right now I'm sure they're scouring minor league rosters, have players in mind so that they're prepared when people approach them on players. I'm sure there's already been dialogue on certain players. So,
well, the number 3 overall pick was a pretty difficult decision. I don't think that was, a slam dunk easy pick either. So I think we'll find out what he's made of, right? But he's being forced into situations where he has to make some tough decisions, has to lean on guys that are in his corner, Rob Metzler, Mark Connor, in the draft, right? And so
we'll see Sartori, Sam Menzen.
I haven't heard a lot about them, but we'll see what he does when it comes time to make some trades, right? I think he made a difficult but smart move in going out and getting the high school kid as opposed to taking the college bat. But again, that's time will tell if it was a smart pick or not. We don't know that. And now hopefully with the draft, with the trade deadline, we should be able to gauge a little bit more on the returns for certain players and whether we think it was a good return or not, just based on the minor league data that we have. There really isn't a lot that we know when it comes to the draft until these guys get into the farm systems and start to play a little bit. So yeah, we'll see coming up whether he's able to make a good move and get the Tigers some pieces back. They're going to help him in the future.
All right, we're getting shorter on time. There's 3 things I want to discuss. So quick, give me some Jonathan Scope DFA.
Yeah, Jonathan Scope was cut from the Tigers roster. Yeah, it was tough. Look, this is a guy who's been with the Tigers since 2020, served as the everyday second baseman for quite some time. He is, 20 plus home runs in 2021, got a contract extension, signed the deal. There was a lot of excitement about that, thinking that he was going to be somebody that could be a second baseman for the Tigers. And they finally made the playoffs, and we all know how everything went in 2022. But Tigers made the decision after Friday's 12-2 loss to the Toronto Blue Jays. Scope finishes the 2023 season with the Tigers hitting .213 with 0 home runs, 13 walks, 37 strikeouts, and a .550 OPS in 55 games. 11-year big league veteran. The Tigers are eating about $3.5 million of a $7.5 million contract. He's going to go through a waiver process. Once he clears waivers, he'd be eligible to sign with a different team for the prorated major league minimum salary, while the Tigers pay the rest of his salary, which is paying that $3.5 million for the rest of the year. Adios, Jonathan Scope.
What am I doing right now?
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
He's waving.
I'm waving bye-bye.
No, I mean, look, man, good defender, somebody that obviously brought a lot to the clubhouse. Like I enjoyed all my interactions with him. He's
a pro,
as
man.
pro as a pro can get. No, and he handled everything really well too. I mean, he lost the everyday role right at the beginning of the season, transitioned into a utility role, kind of only played against left-handed starters, sometimes came off the bench as a pinch hitter against lefty relievers, played more innings at third base and second base. I mean, he's a second baseman. And he made a switch over to third base, played a lot over there. Also just wasn't in the lineup every day. Like he really barely played. And he handled it well.
I'm going to cut this short. I'm going to give you one piece of data, and then we're going to move on because it's not worth discussing anymore. Bye-bye, Jonathan Scope. Last 650 at-bats. He has a 57 WRC+. plus. There's 150 major leaguers that have 650 at-bats over the course of the 2022-2023 season. Okay? Excuse me, 175 position players have 650 at-bats in 2022-2023. Jonathan Scope ranks 175 out of 175 hitters with a 57 WRC+. plus. So here's what I have to say to you, John. Bye-bye. See ya. Let's move on. Okay. How about we had some history the other day? We had something that Evan Petzold probably had a good time watching because it'll be a memory for a long time. We had a no-hitter. Talk to me about that, Ev.
It was cool seeing him final out. Just, once they got it, Alex Lane kind of did a little fist bump thing, and, teammates came and swarmed him, and, they were able to get all three of the pitchers out there on the field together for the Bally Sports interview, and they brought them all in the interview room along with Derek Haas as well. And yeah, it was a cool experience. I mean, a combined no-hitter, the first one in franchise history. Also the 9th no-hitter in franchise history as well, the first since Spencer Turnbull's no-hitter in the 2021 season. Yeah, Matt Manning went 6 2/3. Jason Foley went 1 1/3. And Alex Lang went 1 inning to finish the deal. Yeah, combined no-hitter. I've never seen a no-hitter before in person, so that was a really good experience to see that. I wasn't at Spencer Turnbull's no-hitter because that was the COVID year. Or that was the year after the COVID year, but people weren't traveling yet. Everything was still on Zoom. All the interviews were, was through the computer, right? So I didn't make the trip out to Seattle for that. So this was the first time that I've ever seen a no-hitter in person. And it was a really cool experience. It was nice to see. I thought AJ Hinch did a great job managing Matt Manning, just knowing when to pull a plug on him. Mark, shout out to you because you called it before AJ said it. Back stiffness. I think you mentioned that in like the 3rd or 4th inning. I said, Mark, you're an idiot. You don't know anything about what's going on the mound. Like, you don't even know what you're talking about. And then we get in there and AJ Hinch says, yeah, his back was stiff for most of the game. And I'm like, okay, yeah, Mark does know what he's talking about. Okay. But anyway, yeah, like he handled it well. Matt was losing his stuff, there in the 7th inning. It would have been nice to see him get through 7, but walked a batter. They pulled him. Jason Foley comes in. He does his thing. We all know how nasty he's been. And then Alex Lang gets the 3 outs. He had a strikeout, but the last out was a ground ball to third base that ended it. And then there was a ton of celebration, and it was just a really cool day at the ballpark. And it was even better because the Tigers got to Kevin Gausman, one of the best pitchers in baseball. And it was right from the beginning, from the get-go. Started with a Riley Green 1-out single. Spencer Torkelson hits a double. Kerry Carpenter hits a triple. Suddenly it's 2-0. The score holds all the way through. It was a good game.
Beautiful game. One of the better games of the year. Tip of the hat to Matt Manning. He was really, really good.
He grinded. You were right about the back stiffness. He grinded.
Yeah, I am a Google doctor. But I do want to say, interesting pitch mix. We'll get into Matt Manning after we watch his next start. Matt Manning is doing interesting things, people. I know he's frustrating. He never stays healthy, but he's got a lot of upside.
He never seems consistent either. I mean, yeah, he seems up and down all the time. But I like the way that I like the way that he used the curveball and the slider like way more and didn't use the fastball as much. I thought that was a smart approach for him. I can't wait to get to Seattle and like talk to him a little bit more about it and just try to like understand whether that's something that was just, is that game plan for the Blue Jays or is that game plan for Matt Manning? Like we're going to find out as he moves forward.
It's good to know that he has enough flexibility and execution that he can do a few things because Matt Manning has a really, really good fastball. I mean, forget the velocity. It's just tough to hit no matter what the velocity is. He seems like he's added a cutter. So he's got something that's good to pair with his slider and suddenly a reappearing curveball. And we'll get more into Matt Manning after we see him a few more times. I want to, in kind of a lightning round, touch on futures game. We saw Jay Hen and Colt Keith both in the futures game. We saw Colt Keith face a guy throwing 102 in the shadows. I was frightened for the boy. He did manage to take a slider off the hands and flip it into right field and had a couple pretty good swings at fastballs. Jay Hen got to employ the challenge system to get himself a walk. Both accredited themselves pretty well. That was pretty fun to see, right?
Yeah, no, good to see, and kind of kicked off All-Star festivities for the week. Got the home run derby on Monday night, got the actual All-Star game on Tuesday. We're going to really enjoy Wednesday and Thursday because those are kind of like real off days, especially because, for the Tigers, right, they have only Michael Lorenzen is going to be in the All-Star game, but they have the draft on Monday, they have the draft on Tuesday, and so I'm looking forward to Wednesday. Got some more things to do on that day, but so really, I'm looking forward to Thursday before I fly out to Seattle on Friday. But yeah, no, it was good to see Colt Keith and Justin Henry Malloy do their thing. Clock's ticking for those guys. Parker Meadows has been raking in AAA Toledo as well. I don't know if it's going to be trade deadline or when it's going to be exactly, but these guys have got to get up at some point. I think you want to protect the ability to still, have them win, Rookie of the Year next year. I think you want that opportunity for all of them, particularly Colt Keith. I think I think for Colt Keith, I think he needs to still have that ability because the Tigers will get that draft pick next year if he's able to win Rookie of the Year. That's exactly what happened last night with the Mariners because of Julio Rodriguez. I think if you're the Tigers, you got to protect that chance. I mean, the draft is such a unique way to add talent, and it's the best way to add talent, quite honestly, to add young talent into the farm system that you can develop and that you can mold into your own. So I think if the Tigers can wait until a certain point where they know that Colt Keith is going to retain his rookie status next season, I think that's when they got to call him up. It's going to have to happen at some point. He looks too good, man. He just looks way too good.
All right, I'm gonna give you this one. Not that I agree with it, but we've talked for an hour on a lot of topics. It's been an exciting first half. I want to say you can rate, subscribe, and comment where you find all podcasts. You can always find this pod at the Free Press, at thefreep.com. It's always embedded there. I want to say for our executive producers, Kirk Crawford and Anjanette Delgado, and for our producer, Robin Chan, who always makes us sound good. This is Mark Gorash for Evan Petzold. And I got to say, peace.